The desert of Silver Creek had seen many strange days, but none like this one. Officer Michael Hayes thought it was just another chase, another criminal trying to outrun the law on those endless, sunburnt back roads. The siren had barely died when the dust began to settle, and Michael felt the weight of the Arizona heat pressing down on his shoulders. But what happened next was something no amount of training could have prepared him for. The suspect, Eric Duran, didn't run straight, away like most men cornered by the law. Instead, he moved with a twitchy kind of confidence, like someone holding a secret weapon. He threw open the back of his van, pointed at Michael with wild eyes, and shouted one single command that tore the silence apart. "Attack!" From the aged shadows of the van leapt a German shepherd, large and fierce, its muscles tight, its teeth flashing in the hard light of the desert sun. For a moment, Michael braced himself for the strike, his hand hovering near his holster. But then, the impossible happened. The dog froze mid-stance, its chest heaving, its paws planted in the dirt. Its growl softened into a quiver, and with a sound almost too soft for the onlookers to hear, it whimpered. Slowly, uncertainly, the shepherd stepped forward, not to strike, but to press its head into Michael's chest. And in that moment, Michael's world split wide open. Because this wasn't just any German shepherd. This was Bruno, his old K9 partner. The partner he had mourned 5 long years ago, believed dead after a fire that tore through an operation in El Paso. They had told him Bruno never made it out, that the flames had swallowed him. Yet here he stood, alive, scarred, older, but still the same dog that had once saved Michael's life more times than he could count. The memories surged like a flood, nights patrolling dark alleys, missions where silence could mean death, the weight of trust that passed unspoken between man and dog. Michael's throat tightened as he whispered the name he hadn't dared speak in years. Bruno. The dog's ears twitched. His body trembled as if caught between two worlds, the one his new master demanded and the one his heart still remembered. Behind them, the suspect barked orders, his voice desperate, louder, angrier each time. "Attack!" I said, "Attack!" But the shepherd didn't move. Instead, he shifted, lowering his body not to strike Michael, but to shield him. The growl returned, deep and fierce, but now aimed squarely at the man who had stolen him, trained him, and tried to turn loyalty into a weapon. From the porch of Miller's Cafe, townsfolk had gathered, pulled from their routines by flashing lights and chaos in the alley. Among them stood Lucy Miller, her apron still dusted with flour, her sharp eyes catching the smallest details. She had known Michael for years, had seen him carry burdens too heavy for one man, and she felt her heart pound as she realized what was happening. "That dog knows him," she whispered, barely aware she had spoken aloud. Michael didn't draw his weapon. He didn't need to. Instead, he crouched slowly, his open hand extended, his voice steady even though his heart felt ready to break. "Bruno, it's me. You remember." "I know you do." The shepherd whimpered again, then stepped closer, brushing against Michael's side. Behind them, Eric's panic spilled over. He fumbled for the knife at his waist, spitting curses, screaming betrayal at the dog he thought he owned. But before he could strike, Bruno lunged, not at Michael but past him. The shepherd crashed into Eric with the force of a battering ram, sending him sprawling across the gravel, the knife clattering harmlessly into the dust. The onlookers gasped, some cheering, some crossing themselves at the sight of the animal's fury. Michael moved quickly, his body instinctively covering Bruno's as he secured the scene. The suspect writhed on the ground, pinned by the very beast he had tried to command. Lucy stepped down from the porch, her voice trembling with awe. "Oh my God, that dog just saved you!" Michael's hand found Bruno's collar, steadying him, calming him. The shepherd looked up at him then, really looked, with eyes that carried 5 years of loss, of pain, of memory. and Michael felt something snap loose inside him, a knot that had sat heavy in his chest for too long. He turned to Lucy, his voice breaking with emotion. "His name's Bruno. He was my canine partner before he vanished." Lucy's jaw dropped. She remembered the night of the fire, the rumors, the grief that had followed. "They said he didn't make it," she whispered. Michael swallowed hard. "That's what we thought. We assumed the flames took him when the roof came down. But Bruno was here. Against every odd, against every cruel hand that had tried to claim him, Bruno had found his way back." As another cruiser pulled into the alley, Deputy Cole Ramirez stepped out, young and eager, his face sharp with worry. "What happened? You—" "Okay?" he called, jogging closer. "I'm fine," Michael answered, nodding toward Eric, still pinned by the shepherd. "He tried to sick this dog on me, but the dog refused." Cole stopped short, his eyes widening as he took in the sight. "Wait a second. Is that him, the shepherd, the one from El Paso?" Michael's voice softened, the disbelief still thick in it. "Same scars, same ear, same eyes?" His hand brushed Bruno's neck, and beneath the worn collar his fingers found a scratched, nearly bare metal tag. The letters were faint but still there, carved deep enough to survive fire, theft, and 5 years of separation. LR09. "Bruno," he said again, almost like a prayer. The dog responded by leaning into his side. Lucy crossed her arms. "It makes sense now. A few weeks back, some kids said they saw a van with cages parked by the old meat-hacking warehouse at the edge of town. I thought it was just urban legend stuff. Stray animal traps, weird noises at night, but this might be bigger." Michael turned toward her. "You think there's a group operating nearby?" Lucy nodded. "Could be. It's not just dogs. I've had ranchers complain about missing livestock, too. I didn't connect the dots until now." Eric groaned louder, drawing their attention back. "That dog, it wasn't supposed to act like this. He always obeyed Cole. Moved to cuff him while Michael called it in. Suspect in custody. Requesting animal control and evidence pick up at alleyway behind Miller's Cafe. Code read tagging for possible animal trafficking." As he clicked off the radio, Michael glanced at Lucy. "You said something about an old warehouse." "Yeah, on Fraser Road. It's been abandoned since before I was born, but people say strange vehicles come and go late at night. You might want to check it out." Michael nodded. "We will. First, I need to get him checked." He turned to Bruno, now sitting calmly beside him, panting softly but alert. His body showed signs of mistreatment. Matted fur, slight limping on the right. Hind leg, scars old and new. But his posture was proud. His eyes never left Michael. Cole crouched beside them. "You think he's still fit for duty?" Michael glanced down at the shepherd and smiled faintly. "He's already proven he hasn't forgotten. The job. Or me?" Cole grinned. "Then maybe he's not just back. Maybe he's ready." Michael didn't respond. He simply reached out, scratched gently behind Bruno's left ear, the one still bent, and whispered, "Let's go home." The old warehouse on Fraser Road sat like a scar at the edge of town, its corrugated steel walls faded to the color of bone. The lot surrounding it was overgrown, with brittle weeds and dry mesquite. Fencing rusted and partially collapsed. Once a meat-hacking plant, it had been abandoned for over 2 decades at least officially. But as the sun dipped behind the low ridge to the west, casting long shadows across the gravel, Officer Michael Hayes pulled his cruiser to Assalant stop just beyond the tree-line. Beside him sat Bruno, alert and upright, in the passenger seat. The shepherd's coat had been brushed clean at the station, but his muscles still held the tension of a dog, ready for command. His ears flicked as if tuning into frequencies only he could hear. His deep brown eyes never leaving the warehouse ahead. The scar on his leg still showed under the fur. but it didn't seem to slow him. If anything, it gave him weight like a soldier returning to the field. Michael scanned the area through binoculars. No movement. The only sound was the dry rattle of insects and the occasional creak of wind-blown sheet metal. He unhooked the door, silently. Bruno jumped out without a command, padding beside him through the overgrowth, tail low, nose twitching. They reached the side entrance. The lock had been snapped and repaired with a flimsy chain looped through the handles. Michael didn't need to say a word. Bruno was already sniffing along the base of the door. A soft whine left his throat. Michael drew his flashlight and pried, the chain off with a crowbar from the trunk. The metal shrieked softly in the stillness. He opened the door just wide enough for them to slip through. Inside, the air was stale and thick with Theodore of animals unwashed, confined. Dust floated in sharp beams of light slicing through broken windows. Stacks of wooden crates lined one wall, most of them closed and padlocked. In the far corner, a row of large cages stood under tattered tarps. Then came the sound. Soft, desperate, a whimper. Bruno's ears perked. He let out one sharp bark, low and guttural, then took off toward the far end of the warehouse. Michael followed, his flashlight beam bouncing off rusted beams and stained concrete. As he reached the corner, he stopped cold. 4 cages, 3 of them occupied. Inside were dogs, emaciated, wide-eyed, trembling. 2 adult mutts and a litter of German Shepherd puppies, barely a few months old. They were huddled together on shredded cloth and metal grates, ribs showing, paws raw. Bruno stood still, his body rigid, but this expression soft. He let out a slow, breathy whine. Michael's jaw tightened. He moved forward, inspecting the locks, cheap padlocks, easy to break. He didn't need a warrant to intervene. This wasn't just a tip anymore. This was criminal evidence in plain sight. He knelt beside the nearest cage where a puppy lifted its head weakly, its tongue barely flicking the air. Michael reached into his back pocket and pulled out a protein bar from his emergency kit. He unwrapped it slowly and pushed half through the bars. The puppy licked it, then began to chew in slow, cautious motions. The other dogs watched but didn't move. He turned to Bruno. "Find anything else?" The shepherd had already moved to a set of stacked crates nearby, sniffing intently at a wooden box wedged beneath the others. He barked once, sharp and urgent. Michael followed. The box was sealed, but not locked. Inside, wrapped in burlap, were several rolled documents, plastic sealed. Michael pulled them out and unrolled the first one on the concrete floor. A map, highway lines, crossbar routes, arrows drawn in red connecting Silver Creek tow towns along the Mexican border. Some had codes, scribbled beside them. C1, B-Stack WD4. The corners were smudged with what looked like dried blood. Before Michael could react, the side door groaned open behind them. He stood up fast, flashlight in one hand, the other near his weapon. But it was only Lucy. She wore jeans, boots, and a white button-up shirt rolled to the elbows. Her ponytail was messier than usual, and she carried a small cooler and a brown paper bag in one hand. Her breath caught when she saw the cages, and her free hand flew to her mouth. "God," she whispered, stepping closer. I didn't think it was real." Michael nodded toward the dogs. "It's worse than we thought." She crouched beside the cage with the puppies, her expression softening as she pulled a water bottle from the cooler and slowly poured some into the lid. The smallest puppy licked at it eagerly. Her voice trembled. "Someone has to pay for this." Michael gestured toward the crate with the map. "They will. This is organized. Routes, drops, code names. It's not just stolen dogs. They're moving other cargo." Lucy stood slowly. "Should I call animal control?" Michael nodded. "Tell them to bring transport units and backup. We need this whole site processed. And Lucy, can you take pictures carefully? Don't touch anything, but I want it documented before anyone has a chance to clean it up." She didn't hesitate. Pulling her phone from her pocket, she began to snap photos. Every cage, every injured dog, every crate and corner. She moved with quiet determination, no longer just Abby Stander. Outside, a pickup truck rolled by, slowed for a moment, then continued. Michael stepped to the nearest broken window, watching taillights vanish into the dusk. "We're not alone out here." Lucy looked up. "Think they saw us?" "Probably." He turned to Bruno, who still stood guard over the crate of documents. "Which means we need to move fast." As if in response, Bruno barked again and pawed at the wooden box. Beneath the documents was another layer. Michael lifted it out carefully. This time it was a thick envelope wrapped in plastic. The name Carlos descrolled in red marker. Inside were photos, dogs, lots filled with cages, stacks of bills, and what looked like customs paperwork stamped with fake seals. Lucy looked over his shoulder. "Carlos D. I've heard that name. Old man at the feed store said someone by that name used to rent trucks from the depot before it closed." Michael folded the papers and placed them in a plastic evidence bag. This just went from animal cruelty to federal trafficking. Outside, the sky had deepened to orange, the first stars piercing the fading light. The temperature dropped slightly, but the air felt no less heavy. Bruno let out a soft huff and sat beside Michael, tail curling around his legs. For a moment, neither of them moved. Michael looked at him. "You found it all, didn't you?" Bruno didn't answer, but he didn't need to. He'd always known how to read a room, and now once again he was reading the shadows in Silver Creek. The night had settled over Silver Creek like a thick blanket of smoke. Crickets rasped beneath the brush, and a hot wind stirred loose gravel across the back lot of the abandoned warehouse on Fraser Road. Michael Hayes stood near the entrance with a flashlight in one hand and a thermos of stale coffee in the other, staring at the cluster of evidence bags collected from earlier that evening. The building was now sealed off, perimeter marked, but the weight in his chest hadn't lifted. Something about the silence felt too complete. Bruno paced just outside the door, sniffing the air. The German shepherd's head moved side to side, his breathing sharp, tail twitching with instinct. His coat glistened faintly under the floodlight sable, with silver streaks, though dust and dried blood at his hunches, reminded Michael just how quickly everything had changed in the last 24 hours. Michael turned his head slightly at the sound of tires crunching gravel. A sheriff's department SUV pulled up near the edge of the lot. Deputy Cole Ramirez stepped out, still in uniform, though the buttons of his shirt were undone at the collar and his sleeves were rolled halfway up his forearms. Cole was 31, Latino, and carried the restlessness of youth with the heart of someone trying hard to live up to the badge. His jaw was square, hair buzzed short, and despite his wiry build, there was tension in the way he moved, like he was always bracing for something he couldn't quite see. "You called," he said as he approached. Michael nodded and handed over a copy of the site map. 3 cages still full when animal control left, 5 more empty. We think they've moved dogs through here in waves, 3 to 5 at a time. Cole skimmed the map, then looked toward the darkened tree line. "If this is just one outpost, how many more do you think they've got?" "More than we want to admit." Bruno growled softly and turned toward the southern fence. Michael followed his gaze. "He's been on edge since sundown, keeps circling the west side." "You think someone's coming back?" Cole asked. Michael didn't answer immediately. He crouched beside Bruno, running a hand gently down the dog's back. "He knows something. He always does." Cole scanned the road behind them. "Eric Duran's still in county lockup." "Right. He is." Michael stood. "But that doesn't mean he's not sending friends." The 2 men walked the perimeter, Bruno moving ahead with ears forward, nose close to the ground. As they passed the southern wall, he stopped abruptly and barked once short and clipped. Michael's flashlight swept the ground. At first it looked like disturbed dirt, just a shallow patch where the soil had been shifted, but Bruno stepped back, hackles raised, and gave another low growl. That was enough. Michael signaled Cole to halt, then moved in carefully, sweeping the area with a slow, deliberate beam. Half buried in the soil, just under a layer of dead grass, was a flat rectangular metal plate with a weathered pressure switch beneath it. "Trip mine," Michael muttered. Cole sucked in a breath. "You're kidding." Michael shook his head. "Nope, and I'm guessing this isn't the only one." Bruno was already circling to the east fence. He paused, nose twitching again, then barked sharply. "Another. Mine." This one was connected to a wire that stretched under the gravel and disappeared into a cluster of empty crates. Michael clicked his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 27. We've got evidence of explosives at the Fraser Road warehouse, requesting EOD support. Immediate, possible ambush, perimeter is compromised." Bruno growled again, more urgently now, and sprinted back, toward the west entrance. Suddenly, the warehouse lights cut out. All of them. Floodlights, internal bulbs, total blackout. Michael swore under his breath and drew his weapon. Cole mirrored him, stepping toward the van for cover. Bruno disappeared into the darkness, but only for a few seconds. A muffled shout came from the trees, followed by the sharp report of a weapon being cocked. Then a single shot cracked the air. Michael spun and ducked behind the corner of the building. Cole dropped low near the cruiser, shouting, "Where'd it come from?" Michael didn't answer. His ears were straining. Another figure moved at the edge of the lot. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black, rifle aimed low, and then came the growl. Loud, fast, followed by a blur of movement. Bruno launched from the shadows, teeth flashing, and tackled the man from the side. The rifle discharged into the air as the attacker fell back, screaming. Michael sprinted forward and disarmed the man. In two swift motions, Cole cuffed him before he could recover. The attacker was in his 40s, built like a wrestler, with a shaved head and snake tattoo coiling down his left arm. His eyes darted wild between Bruno and the two officers. "You don't know who you're messing with." "We're learning fast," Michael said flatly. From the tree-line, another shape moved, but this one stopped short. A second man, younger, saw the fallen attacker and bolted. Cole raised his gun, but Michael held up a hand. "Let him run. He'll lead us to the next nest." Bruno stood guard over the captured man, his chest heaving, fur on end, but eyes focused. Michael knelt beside him. "You saved my life again, partner." The dog licked his wrist once, then sat beside him, ever still. Michael turned to Cole. "Check that van. See if there's anything else wired." Cole returned moments later, pale. Found another mine rigged to the ignition. If we tried to move it, Michael stood slowly. "That's not just intimidation. That's intent to kill." "We were being hunted," Cole said. Michael nodded. "But they forgot one thing." "What's that? We don't hunt alone." Morning light crept through the narrow cracks of the broken warehouse roof, casting pale rays onto the dusty floor where Bruno sniffed around with unwavering focus. His thick sable and silver coat bristled slightly as he nosed beneath a collapsed shelf, then let out a low, urgent bark. Michael Hayes, still stiff from the events of the night before, knelt beside the dog. "What is it, buddy?" he muttered. Bruno's tail swept the ground once as he pawed at a pile of moth-eaten fabric. Michael reached into the heap, pulling free an old sheriff's jacket from decades past. Inside the torn lining, tucked carefully into a hidden seam, was a small, red plastic memory card. Michael turned it over in his gloved fingers. No label, just a scratched surface and the faint scent of smoke. Michael's heart pounded harder, not from adrenaline, but from the weight of discovery. They weren't just dealing with low-level dog smugglers. Something far bigger was buried here, both literally and figuratively. Earlier that morning, Bruno had led him through the frost-bitten ruins of the warehouse yard, his nose twitching as he followed a scent trail. It had taken them to a rusted steel door, partially concealed behind a stack of rotting crates. With some effort, Michael had forced it open, revealing a flight of narrow stone steps winding downward into darkness. The air below was damp and stale, tinged with the metallic scent of decay and old gasoline. Michael flicked on his flashlight. Then Arrow Tunnel ended in a cement-walled room no bigger than a one-car garage. Inside were plastic bins filled with paper shipping manifests, handwritten notes, ledgers. A busted computer sat on a folding table, its screen shattered, and next to it, a filing cabinet with own drawer slightly ajar, revealing tightly packed folders labeled with initials and dates. Michael flipped one open. Inside were scanned documents of vehicle registrations, dozens of out-of-state license plates, and a list of exotic dog breeds with prices next to them. On another page, shipment complete. Duran handled drop. Payment Denver account code marked for Wallace. The name was a gut punch. He hadn't heard it in years, but the last time he did, it was whispered during a narcotics bust gone wrong. Wallace had supposedly fled the state after the cartel heat intensified. But this suggested Wallace was not only back, but was one of the puppeteers. Michael's breath fogged in the cold air as he closed the folder and looked down at Bruno, who sat quietly by the wall. The dog's deep brown eyes, though aged and rimmed with gray, burned with unspoken understanding. "Good boy," Michael said softly. "You always knew where to look." Back on the surface, the day was already turning tense. Lucy Palmer was standing outside the warehouse, shifting nervously in her oversized wool coat. She clutched her camera to her chest, eyes darting toward every passing car. Lucy, a 29-year-old local journalist with red curls tucked messily into a knit cap, had always been persistent, but not reckless. Yet, since discovering the cages with the sick puppies, she had become a quiet storm of determination. She had taken photos of the starving animals, the chains, the hidden trap doors, and even captured a blurry shot of one of the smugglers before he escaped. And she'd gone, further sending encrypted copies to a trusted FBI contact in Seattle. But someone must have caught wind. That morning, she'd found her car tires slashed and a note tucked beneath her windshield wiper. "Stop or disappear." No signature, just a drawing of a dog's paw with a line slashed through it. Still, Lucy had come, and when Michael emerged from the warehouse holding the memory card and a few files, she nodded as if she knew. "This is bigger than wet hot." Michael didn't smile. He didn't have it in him. "I need you to stay safe, Lucy. They know who you are now." "I know," she replied quietly. "But if we don't expose this, who will?" Back inside the warehouse, Bruno moved toward the shadows again, nose low. Michael followed as the dog led him behind a tall stack of tires. At first, it looked like nothing more than a junk pile, but Bruno began digging with his front paws until something wooden emerged. An old crate sealed with rusted metal bands. Michael pried it open and found it packed not with goods, but with ledgers wrapped in plastic. In one of the ledgers was a rough map hand-drawn and dotted with markings around Colorado, Utah, and Oregon. Notes like "delivery cleared," "awaiting pickup," and "Denver handler 3K advance" filled the margins. And then came the most chilling detail, a list of names. Beside each name were either green check marks or red X's. Michael's eyes scanned until he found his own. M. Hayes X. They had marked him for death. Outside, a cold wind whipped through the narrow alleys of Silver Creek, stirring dust and loose leaves across the concrete. Bruno stood at attention, body rigid, ears twitching. Michael rose, files tucked under his arm, and gave the area a sweeping glance. He didn't see anyone, but Bruno's instincts were rarely wrong. "Let's go," he whispered. Bruno didn't move until Michael gave the faintest nod. Then the dog trotted ahead, ever the silent sentinel. As they reached the edge of town, Michael placed a call to Cole Ramirez, his young deputy and one of the few people he still trusted. Michael described what they'd found: the documents, the memory card, the map, the list. There was a pause on the line before Cole answered. "I'll meet you tonight. Don't let that card out of your sight." And just as Michael ended the call, a low growl rumbled from Bruno's chest. The dog turned sharply, ears flattening as he stared into the nearby field. Michael followed his gaze. In the distance, a dark SUV was parked half off the road, its windows too tinted to see through. As Michael stared, the engine roared and the vehicle peeled away. They were being watched. The rain had returned to Silver Creek with a vengeance. Sheets of water poured from the heavens, turning the narrow dirt road leading out of the warehouse district into a muddy trap. Michael Hayes gripped the steering wheel tightly as his cruiser skidded slightly on a sharp turn. On the passenger seat, a locked evidence case rested inside it. The USB drive Bruno had sniffed out, now confirmed to contain emails, transaction records, and contact logs that linked the local smugglers to a nationwide trafficking network. It was enough to bring down half the operation if he could get it to the precinct in time. Bruno sat alert in the back seat, his fur still damp from the earlier search. The 10-year-old German Shepherd, hissable and silver coat stray with dirt, had not taken his eyes off the road ahead. His ears twitched with every sound beyond the windshield, and a low growl bubbled in his throat as the cruiser neared the outskirts of town. Up ahead, a fallen branch blocked half the road. Michael slowed the car, but instinct whispered that something was wrong. His hand hovered over the radio, ready to call for backup. The moment he opened the door and stepped out, he caught a flicker of movement to his left, too fast, too close. A sharp whistle cut through the rain. Bruno's ears flattened. Then chaos erupted. Two masked men lunged from the bushes, one wielding a knife, the other a stun baton. Michael ducked instinctively, drawing his sidearm, but a flash of lightning momentarily blinded him. The man with the knife surged forward, slashing toward Michael's chest. Before the blade connected, a streak of fur launched from the back seat. Bruno burst from the cruiser, jaws wide, and slammed into the attacker midair. The man fell with a cry, the knife skittering away into the mud. Michael didn't have time to react before the second man swung the stun baton at his shoulder. The shock crackled through his muscles, dropping him to one knee. As he struggled to stay upright, a voice called out through the downpour, a voice Michael recognized all too well. "Well, well, Sheriff Hayes, you just don't know when to quit, do you?" Standing under a broken umbrella was Eric Duran, soaked trench coat clinging to his wiry frame, his greasy black hair stuck to his gaunt face, and the pistol in his hand gleamed under the stormlight. He stepped forward, lips curling in contempt. "I told them you dig too deep. I just didn't think you'd bring that mud along again." Michael gritted his teeth. "Your network's done, Eric. You won't make it out of this." "Oh, but I will!" Eric raised his voice and gave a sharp command. "Bruno, attack!" Bruno, still pinning the first attacker to the ground, froze. His ears twitched. Rain trickled down his bent left ear, and his brown eyes darted between Eric and Michael. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then Bruno snarled deep, guttural, full of fury, and turned on Eric. The gun fired, a deafening crack, but Bruno dodged to the side and slammed into Eric's legs. The man toppled with a shout, the pistol spinning into a puddle. Bruno's teeth clamped onto Eric's arm, forcing the criminal to scream in pain and drop his backup blade. The sound of bones crunching echoed under the rain. At that moment, headlights cut through the storm. Another patrol SUV screeched to a halt nearby, and a figure leapt out, Deputy Cole Ramirez, the young officer with a quick grin and a heart too big for his own safety. He was in his late 20s, with olive skin, a buzz cut, and a lean build wrapped in a soaked deputy's uniform. Without hesitation, he drew his weapon and ran toward the fry. Michael managed to stand just as the second masked attacker rose behind Cole, ready to strike. "Cole, behind you." But Bruno was faster. Breaking from Eric, Bruno lunged again, knocking the second attacker off balance. In the chaos, Cole spun and tackled the man to the ground, pinning him with practiced force. Bruno limped slightly. His scarred hind leg had twisted awkwardly on the wet terrain, but he didn't stop growling until Michael placed a calming hand on his head. "We need medics," Cole muttered, wincing as he pressed a hand to a bleeding cut on his side. "That guy got a lucky swing. In before I took him down." Michael nodded. "I'll call it in. You okay to stand?" "I'm good." Cole tried to grin, but pain flickered in his eyes. 15 minutes later, the scene was under control. 2 more patrol units arrived, followed by an ambulance. Paramedics moved efficiently, bandaging Cole and checking on Michael's bruised shoulder. Eric was cuffed and loaded into the back of a cruiser, his right arm shattered and his curses swallowed by the sirens. In the distance, the clouds began to break, revealing the first hint of morning light. Lucy showed up not long after, hair pulled into a messy ponytail, wearing a light blue rain jacket over jeans and sneakers. She looked pale when she saw the scuffle remnants and Cole's bandage side. Without a word, she rushed over, crouching beside him as he sat on the back of the ambulance. "You idiot," she whispered. "You're not invincible." Cole chuckled, then winced. "I'm starting to figure that out." Bruno limped over to them and sat beside Lucy, pressing his head gently against her arm. She smiled and scratched behind his bent ear. "Thank you," she murmured. "You saved them both." Bruno closed his eyes, breathing slowly, his job done for now. The evidence case, still dry inside the cruiser, was transferred to the deputy commander's vehicle. With the USB drive and Eric's confession in custody, the department now had more than enough to begin taking down the rest of the network. As the morning sun finally broke through the storm clouds, Michael stood beside his cruiser, one hand resting on Bruno's head. He looked toward the hills beyond Silver Creek, knowing this wasn't over. Not yet. But they had survived another night. And for now, that was enough. The morning sun stretched over Silver Creek, but tension crackled in the air like a wire stretched too tight. At the county operations base, hastily set up near the abandoned industrial lot on the outskirts of town, law enforcement units stood in grim formation. Tactical vests were strapped, radios crackled with static, and a large projection of a warehouse blueprint glowed on a portable screen inside a command trailer. Michael Hayes stood with arms crossed, his dark navy patrol uniform now layered with a Kevlar vest. His storm gray eyes scanned the tactical map one last time. The bruises on his shoulder still ached from the ambush, but his grip on the operation was unshaken. Standing beside him, Bruno sat upright, alert, his silver-streaked sable coat now dry but still ruffled from restless pacing. The bent left ear twitched slightly, catching every murmur, every breath. Bruno knew they were going into danger. Across from them, FBI Special Agent Leland Crow gave the final briefing. In his early 50s, Crow was tall and broad with close-cropped salt and pepper hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. He wore a Navy tactical jacket marked FBI and moved with the calm confidence of someone who had seen too many standoffs to be rattled by one more. "We breach from the west," he said, tapping a section of the blueprint. "Michael and K9 unit go in with Alpha Team. Eyes on the northern corridor. Intel says that's where the product is processed. Be ready for booby traps." Duran's files mention a fire suppression rig that could be turned into an incinerator. "We stopped them before they torched the evidence." Michael gave a sharp nod. Bruno let out a low waff as if agreeing. Inside Silver Creek Elementary School, 10-year-old. Finn Carter sat cross-legged by the classroom TV, watching the news stream with wide eyes. A quiet boy with unruly chestnut curls and oversized glasses, Finn was often more comfortable around animals than people. When his classmates laughed or teased, he simply retreated into his drawings, mostly of German shepherds, eagles, and firefighters. But today, Finn wasn't drawing. His gaze was fixed on the screen where a local reporter stood near flashing police lights. "They're going to be okay," he whispered to no one in particular, gripping a tiny wooden figure of a dog he kept in his pocket. Bruno's there. His teacher, Miss Leanne Doyle, a kind woman in her 40s with a floral scarf and a warm voice, glanced at him and offered a soft smile. "They're heroes, Finn. Sometimes all we can do is believe in them and pray." Finn nodded solemnly. He already had. Back at the warehouse, the operation moved like clockwork. A convoy of black SUVs and armored vans rolled through the cracked asphalt yard, halting near a crumbling loading dock. Alpha Team, 5 agents in full tactical gear, lined up behind the steel side door. Michael took his place beside them, his hand resting on Bruno's harness. A soft growl vibrated in the dog's chest. Not fear, but focus. 3-2 breach. The door shattered, inward with a thunderous crack. Smoke grenades hissed, filling the interior with a cloud of gray fog. Bruno charged forward, nose low, paws silent on the concrete. Michael followed close, weapon drawn. The interior of the warehouse was a maze of crates, tarps, and makeshift walls. The stench of chemicals and damp wood clung to the air. Suddenly, Bruno stopped. He turned sharply toward a blank concrete wall. His hackles rose. Michael recognized the cue instantly. "Hidden chamber!" he shouted. Agent Crow signaled his team. One of them, a wiry tech named Dev, rushed forward with a sensor wand. A few seconds passed. Then, beep! The wall was false. Behind it, heat signatures flickered. They found the concealed latch, pried it open. Inside was a compact storage room, and lining the back wall were plastic barrels of precursor chemicals, vacuum-sealed bricks of heroin, and stacks of cash wrapped in duct tape. But what made Michael's breath catch was a box rigged with wiring, its red light blinking ominously. "Bomb!" one of the agents shouted. But the man who had tried to trigger it never made it that far. As the team moved to secure the area, a man with a bandaged wrist, the same bruised smuggler who had escaped the earlier arrest, lunged from the shadows near the chamber. He held a detonator in one hand, face wild with desperation. Bruno saw him first. With a feral bark, the German shepherd launched through the air, striking the man squarely in the chest. They hit the floor in a tangle, the detonator skidding across the room. Michael rushed in and kicked the device away before cuffing the attacker. The man howled in pain, blood trickling from his arm where Bruno's jaws had found flesh. "You don't know what you're doing," he spat. "We're just a piece." "There's more everywhere." Michael stared down at him coldly. "Not today." Outside, as agents poured from the building, securing suspects and loading evidence, a crowd had gathered near the barricades. Townspeople of every stripe truck drivers, teachers, waitresses, and retirees stood in the drizzle, watching the flashing lights with tense faces. The news anchor, a sharp-voiced woman named Rachel Tan with a teal raincoat and a silver mic, spoke into the camera. Sources confirmed that the notorious smuggler's warehouse has been raided successfully. Sheriff Michael Hayes and his K9 Bruno are said to have played a pivotal role in locating hidden narcotics and preventing a bomb detonation. Lucy watched from the library, biting her lip as the footage played. Behind her, the staff clapped softly. In the school, Finn grinned wide, clutching his carved wooden dog. "I told you," he whispered to Miss Doyle. "Brune's a hero." Back at the site, as the last suspect was loaded into the paddy wagon, Bruno limped slightly on his scarred hind leg. Michael knelt beside him, running a hand gently down his back. "You saved us again, old man," he murmured. Bruno simply leaned his head against Michael's chest, tail thumping once. They had stormed the stronghold and won. The courthouse steps of Silver Creek had never seen such a crowd. Banners fluttered gently in the morning breeze, and camera flashes lit the crisp spring air as reporters jostled for position behind the press line. On the granite steps, Sheriff Michael Hayes stood in full uniform, freshly pressed, polished badge gleaming. Beside him sat Bruno, his silver-streaked sable coat brushed to a regal shine, wearing a dark leather collar newly fitted with an official silver K9 tag. Bruno's bent left ear twitched as the judge's voice echoed across the plaza. Inside the courthouse, moments earlier, Eric Duran had been sentenced to 40 years in federal prison alongside several key members of his smuggling ring. The courtroom had been packed journalists, victims, families, and law enforcement officers, all witnessing the collapse of a criminal network that had haunted Silver Creek for years. Eric hadn't spoken a word during sentencing, only shot Michael a look of bitter resentment before being led away in cuffs. But outside, joy was the ruling emotion. Special Agent Leland Crow stood at the microphone, announcing commendations for those involved in the raid. In his tailored navy suit, his salt and pepper hair combed neatly, Crow spoke with pride. "We stand here today not only because of strategy or firepower, but because of loyalty, integrity, and courage, some of which came from 4 legs and a wagging tail." The crowd chuckled warmly. Michael stepped forward as his name was called, accepting the medal with quiet humility. When it was Bruno's turn, Crow knelt beside the dog, fastening a custom-engraved medallion to his collar. K9 Unit, Guardian of Silver Creek. The applause was thunderous. Among the townspeople cheering in the front row was Lucy Bennett, her auburn, hair pinned back beneath a light floral scarf, flour-dusted apron tied around her waist. Her face was flushed, not from embarrassment, but excitement. Today wasn't just about the ceremony. It was also the grand opening of her long-dreamed-of coffee shop, the Guardian's Brew, named in honor of Bruno himself. The cafe stood on the corner of Main Street in a refurbished red brick building that had once housed a printing press. Now it smelled of roasted beans and warm cinnamon, its windows twinkling with fairy lights and chalkboard signs advertising heroes, blend, and justice cones. Inside, mismatched wooden tables gave it charm, and a wall near the counter proudly displayed framed photos of Michael and Bruno alongside local kids' drawings of the K9 hero. Later that afternoon, the whole town seemed to drift toward the cafe. Officers arrived in uniform, families brought homemade pies, and a small folk band played cheerful tunes on the sidewalk. Michael stood near the counter, still a little stiff, in his ceremonial uniform, chatting with neighbors who rarely saw him outside of duty. Finn Carter slipped through the crowd with both hands behind his back. The shy 10-year-old wore a collared shirt for once, his messy chestnut curls combed and pinned awkwardly with gel. As he approached, Bruno looked up immediately, tail thumping softly against the floor. "I made something," Finn said, holding out a hand-carved collar from soft brown leather. Etched on the front plate in neat block letters was one word: Guardian. Michael crouched beside him, taking the collar reverently. "You made this yourself?" Finn nodded, eyes wide. "My dad helped with the tools, but I did the letters. He's more than a police dog. He watches over everyone." Michael fastened the new collar around Bruno's neck. "I think he'd agree." Across the room, Lucy brought out a special tray of cupcakes, each one topped with a tiny chocolate dog bone. "These are for Bruno," she announced, laughing, only slightly less healthy than bacon. Michael raised his coffee mug in a quiet toast. To guardians, seen and unseen. The room echoed with agreement. Even Bruno let out a soft bark, tongue ling with satisfaction. In the days that followed, Silver Creek returned to its peaceful rhythm. But something had changed. Where fear and suspicion had once lingered in alleyways and over fences, now stood unity. Patrols no longer felt like precaution. They felt like pride. The local newspaper ran a full-page feature on the miracle at Silver Creek, highlighting not just the operation, but the people. Lucy's courage in reporting what she overheard, young Finn's sketches that helped identify suspects, and Michael's tireless commitment despite the risk. But above all, it was Bruno's photo that dominated the page. Sitting tall beside Michael, scarred leg and all, with eyes that had seen far too much and still chose loyalty. The headline simply read, Guardian. For Michael, this return to calm was bittersweet. The past weeks had brought him closer to his town than ever before. He no longer felt like a man haunted by failure. Instead, he was surrounded by reminders that hope could take root again, even after fire. One morning, a group of school children on a field trip to the precinct stopped to take photos with Bruno. The dog, ever patient, sat proudly as small hands, patted his fur and asked questions like, did he really stop a bomb? And, can I be a K-9 officer too? Michael watched from the doorway, a quiet smile tugging at the edge of his face. He didn't answer those questions. He let Bruno do the talking. That night, as the sun dipped behind the hills and cast golden light over Silver Creek, Michael stood by his porch railing. Bruno lay at his feet, eye shaft closed, ears flicking lazily with the breeze. You did good, partner, Michael murmured, resting a hand on the dog's head. Real good. Bruno made no sound, but his eyes opened and met Michael's with steady warmth. They had come home, and home was watching back. Sometimes the miracles we're waiting for don't arrive with thunder or trumpets. They come quietly on four paws through the loyalty of a dog, the courage of a child, or the simple choice to do what is right. In a broken world, faith still plants seeds of healing. And just like Michael and Bruno, we too can become guardians, not of towns or carouses, but of kindness, of truth, of each other. Perhaps it wasn't luck that brought Bruno back, or justice that finally knocked on Silver Creek's door. Perhaps it was Hoot moving gently behind the scenes, reminding us that even in our darkest hours he sends us protectors. Sometimes they wear a badge, and sometimes they wear a scarred collar with the word Guardian engraved by a child's hand. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe again. Type Amen in the comments. If you believe, God still works miracles through love and loyalty. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. May God bless you and protect the guardians in your life, whether they walk on two legs or